I'm going to talk about authorization as a service, meaning to, from APEX, use an external means of authenticating users. I will be using the national Swedish ID, BankID, to show how I'm doing this, but there are plenty of others that are web service-based authentication services that works in similar ways. You may not use the same mechanics to prove who you are, but it's based on running web services to request a challenge for someone to complete to be logged in. That was one too much. A bit of me, I already stated most of these, I think. You have my both blog and Twitter handles down here at the bottom. And as I say, I like everything around databases, data, performance. Okay. So in this presentation, I will really cover three things, which essentially could have been three presentations, but I'll wrap them up in one. And there's 4 bullets. I can't really count, obviously, but we'll do web service from PL/SQL. We'll integrate the web service in APEX. And we'll set up the APEX traditional logon page to use this SOAP call, web service. Yeah, that's it. So we combine all those three in the end to one. And here's just a picture to a little bit go through. I'm not going to talk exactly about every single number because there's no real point. But so we have a user using a web browser want to get into an application. So at that point, that request goes to the application that uses the API from a vendor. This is in BankID. This is called the relaying partner. They send it to their server. They in turn talk to BankID to say that here's a user that wants to be logged on or be authenticated. And in when that has happened, then the user can go in with his iPhone to BankID with the BankID app and get up the challenge. And only this person can get it up because it's already established that that person has a certificate to get challenges. No one else can pull up that challenge. And after a while, within 3 minutes, the person completes the challenge, proves that this is actually who the website wanted to authenticate. And at that point, the application, it keeps polling every 3rd second or so. It eventually gets a complete saying that this user was authenticated, you can trust him or her, and then you get into the page you're looking for. So it's a little bit involved in this, and to get the security this way. These guys exist as a way to monetize this service. This is how BankID doesn't have to deal with every small company that wants to use this. They have a bunch of partners, 5, 6 of them today, that takes care of the many companies, and then the really big companies can go directly here and be their own relaying partner. And the reason not everyone can do that is that this software, this server or whatever, is fairly expensive. So not everyone will want to buy it for themselves. Therefore, you go here and you pay a transaction fee for each transaction, for each authentication. So that's what's going on in this kind of login. And the thing is that it looks very hard or very complicated with all these things. But as with all great things with APIs, we don't have to deal with much of that at all. It's very easy to integrate. And we will be looking at 2 SOAP APIs. Here, Authenticate, which says, here's a request for you to challenge someone to prove that they are the right person. And the other one is the polling function to test what is the status of this login. And what I show here is the actual challenge. Everyone that uses this has, of course, seen this many, many times. You get in, you get up your challenge for who you are, you enter your code, and when you're done, you say verify, and then you're in, and then your website figures that out, and you get in to do whatever it was you wanted to do. So that is what this is all about. So a little bit of look at how I address this and how I generally work with things. I started playing with API in SWEOUG just to, even being without the database, without anything, get just the call to work and see how it works and get something that I feel that all the mechanics are now set up to work properly. Then I set up an anonymous block in PL SQL as hard-coded as I can, just to also prove how it works to run it from the database and get the database mechanics out of the way. Change that to PL SQL package with parameters and the stuff, just so that I have something to integrate with. And the last thing is the custom login. And in general, my favorite tool for working with Apex is to not work with Apex, it's to be in SQL Developer. I like being in Apex, but most of the work, I think, ought to be done in SQL Developer, because most of it is PL SQL anyway. So that is what I do. So, and then we have 3 statuses or states for an authentication request that we need to handle. There are many more that you really need to handle, but for a proper login that works, these are the 3 that the request goes through. You start with no client, meaning that the user has not pulled up the user interface on his iPhone to see the challenge yet. The next one is user sign, meaning that, well, we've shown the challenge to the user, but the user has yet to complete it. It can have failed the first time, or it may not have entered anything, or may just be looking at it. But as long as we're in that state, it's user sign, and then you have complete, it's done, and we get back a whole bunch of information, and we can let the user in because it's now been proven that this was the correct user. So if you look at this process using SWEOUG, be jumping a bit back and forth here to show these things. And now let's see if we can. See this, everyone, back there? Okay, very good. So this is how SWEOUG works. When I started this, I was planning to avoid it because it felt like very complicated. And Daniel told me that I was being stupid and I should just do it. And he was right. So we're showing the wrong version of this now. This is the one we're going to start with. So over here is the actual request. This is what we send in to the service. Here's the response we get. When you load in the API definition, the WSDL, you get this. You don't get it with data in it, of course. But you get that, and then you just need to fill it out. And if you don't fill out everything, it will tell you that, well, hey, I'm missing this data piece. So then you just keep filling it in. That's the way this particular service works. Some other web service, of course, just says wrong. Try again. So this is what we have to do. We have social security number, personnummer in Swedish. That's what we send in. This is the person we want to authenticate. So then when we run this, we get this response. This essentially just says, OK, we've accepted your request. There is an order ref number here that is the reference to it. And this is the piece of data we need. So then we go over to the polling function. So now if we run it, we see here, as I said, we're going to get no client. If I now start it on my test phone, it shows up the challenge, and if I now check what I have, I should have user sign. Approve who I am, and now I should be able to get the complete. So now I have a complete here, and I have a bunch of information, what the name is, and all kinds of stuff that they send me in this case. So that's how it works, that's the mechanics, and that's what we'll now automate a little bit better. So to do this in PL/SQL, we essentially repeat the same things, but there is an Apex web service package. We're going to make a request, and that's going to be the one we want to authenticate a person. Then we parse it to get out the order reference so we can poll if it's complete. And then we're into a loop where we make another request, which is the polling request we make. We parse the XML to get out the state. Has it been complete yet, or is it still not working, or not done yet? So that's what we do. So we'll take a look at the code I have, which is horribly hard-coded, and it is to just make it as easy as possible without making extra weight to the code to show, and to make it just as simple as possible without having variables and other things that possibly could go wrong. So over here, and that's the wrong place. We skip the variables. So the first thing is to just set up a variable containing the XML, the exact same thing we saw before. There's no difference here. It's exactly what we had in SOAP UI. And then we make the make request that I talked about we're going to make. This is saying we want to authenticate a person. And then we parse it. We get out the order reference. And when that's done, we set up the polling to collect the state. Again, just an XML. We plug in the order reference there, which is what we want to look for. And then we go into this loop. We sleep 3 seconds. We make the request to say, is it done? And then we parse it to see what the state is. And we end this when we're in complete. And then we just keep asking over and over and over. And that's all there is to it. So if I now run this, then it keeps waiting here. So I go into it and I complete it. That's done, and then it will, within 3 seconds, be done here. So now we completed, now we went through it, and we're making the call out from the database over the network to this service. So we've now proven that we have networking, we have security in the database if there would be something like that, and all of that. This stuff is what works. The rest should just be a matter of making this better so that we can integrate it into Apex. So now, so we looked at that and we tested it. To make a procedure out of this, it's basically exactly the same code, right? We make a few changes. We put in a username as a parameter. We also put in password, but it's not needed, right? Because it's challenged anyway. We're not going to pick up a password. But we need it because Apex has a standard way of calling out functions from its authentication function. Since we're going to use Apex standard model here, it needs in the signature to have a password. It needs to have these 2 fields. So we're just going to send in nothing and ignore whatever's in it, just to make sure that signature of this function is correct. In it, we're going to look up and social security number, the person number, for the user. That is what we're going to send over to the service. So the user doesn't have to every time enter in his password. It's just one time we set it up in the system, and it doesn't get sent from the user to our system time after time after time, so the new one can sniff that out in case that would be a concern. And then we perform the login with BankID doing what we just looked at. So if we just take a quick look at that too, it's not much of a difference, but anyway. So here we start with looking up person number from a table that I set up. That's all we want from it. And then everything else is pretty much, the same. We plug in the person number right in the middle of the XML. We call the request. We parse it to get out the order reference, just as before. We plug that into the XML. We set up the loop in a little bit different way, but anyway. And we make the polling request. Well, we sleep 3 seconds. We make the polling request. And then we parse it to see what is the state. And then we return true or false, depending on if this worked or not. So what we do here is that there can be other ways this ends. So in the procedure, I changed a little bit from what we saw before. When it's none of these anymore, then something has happened. Either you have had an error on an outstanding transaction, or you have a timeout, or you have just failed so many times that it said that, no, we're not letting you in. So then we send back a result. And just for fun, we can run this too. And here we see that I'm sending in a username, not a person number, and just send in nothing in the password. It just needs to be there for technical purposes, right? So again, in this situation, we keep waiting, right? So then I complete the challenge. That not sure what happened there. I'll try it again. There we completed that, and then finishes. So that's it. We have a function now that works, that follows the APEX model, and can be integrated, and can be called. So what happens the first time is that it failed, obviously, because it was an outstanding, and we're not printing out. The A here becomes true or false, right? It became false the first time when it didn't work. But anyway, so now we have the function. We're ready to take the next step and look at getting this into APEX. So what we're going to do, we're going to create a new app, and the reason I create a new app is to show that there's nothing that has already been done in the app, or some old test is still there, make magic just happen. So we do that. We create a custom authentication scheme. We're going to use this function, the auth SWEOUG, that we just looked at. We set the application security must not be public user to make sure that you have to log on, so that the logon page gets fired. And we hide the password field. Since no one's going to enter anything into it, we need to take it out. We can't take it away, which needs to be there, again, for technical purposes, but it can be hidden so that no one can do anything with it. So let's wreck this thing. This is also a tagline for in the APEX world for just about anything. You find a lot on it if you put that tag into Twitter. So let's see if what I just claimed works. It would be nice. Here, so we create a new application. Well, I guess we do not. We begin with logging in instead. Okay, now we create a new application. And just gonna name it Sweden. That's all we do. Don't bother with anything else. It becomes a very boring application, but all we want here is to be able to log in. So now we have the application. Next thing we were going to do was to set up a custom authentication scheme. We find those in the shared components. And then under security, authentication schemes. And here we have the traditional thing that you have the APEX normal cookie-based security that is always used, or that's what you get from the beginning. We create a new one based on nothing. And here we'll call it Bank ID. We choose that it's custom. Auto drops a whole bunch of new fields. You can run PL/SQL that runs before this is done. You can do all kinds of interesting things here. We're only going to use the authentication function name here now because that's all we're testing. And then if you want to do more advanced things, you can, of course, get all kinds of interesting things happening here. So we say that we're going to use that. And now we have created, and when we create a new one, it always becomes the current one, the one that is being used. So we don't have to switch it to be used. It already is. So now let's go back to the application and let's make sure that it forces you to log on. It's up with the application properties, and then it's in the security tab. So here, and we only have to look at one single thing. It's in the authentication area. The first field here is from the beginning set to that it's not required, but we want to make sure that you can't be public. You have to be logged on. So apply that change. Now we just have one last thing to do, and that is to hide the password field. It's not technically needed. It just makes a little bit nicer, and therefore we do it. Hopefully. And if the user interface looks different from what you're used to, this is file 1. You may be sitting on 4.2 or something, and then it's not looking this way. But it has the same exact functions. It's just a different way of navigating them. Yeah, we're going to hide it. So up here, we can set it to hidden instead of a password field as a type. And that's all it takes. So now we've done the things I said on the previous slide, or on the slide, that we're going to do. So for the big test to see if I remember to do everything right, we'll run the application. We get up, so we got forced to log in. That part works. We only enter a username for the person, no password, no social security number, and we can click log in here. Now it sits there and waits for me to get the challenge up here. No, it did not. We'll try that again. It So it failed when it couldn't get it fast enough, I guess. So now I've completed it, and now I should be able to get into the very boring blank page. There we go.